I'm Ari Altman from the Tech Buyers Guru, and I'm going to be reviewing SilverStone's new Primera PM01-RGB case today. This is a case I'm really familiar with, and that's because I actually reviewed on the Tech Buyers Guru website the previous edition of this case, the PM01. Now I have here the side panel of that PM01 just to show you the main difference from an outward point of view. The original Primera PM01 was a really good looking case. It used a metal side panel with an acrylic window. So the most obvious change to this new PM01 is that it has a full-size tempered glass panel. Now, that's not the extent of the changes. I'm just mentioning that to you so you can see, well, oh yeah, now I know that this is the RGB version because of that glass panel. But there are quite a few other changes under the hood, literally. This is kind of the hood of this case, which is designed to look a little bit like a car. And most of them are for the better. There are a couple that I'm going to point out that didn't really hit the ball out of the park, so to speak. But overall, this is an excellent case, just like its predecessor was. Now I'm going to turn it on so that you can really see what this case is all about, because of course this is an RGB case, and the selling point of this in part is that it has RGB lighting built in. But that's not the only reason you should consider this case, as I'll go through and highlight in a moment. So as you can see, it has that glass panel, has a lot of built-in lighting. It has accent lighting here. It has a light strip on the bottom along the lower panel, and of course it has 3 fans up front that are all RGB lit. And these are excellent fans, I should mention. The case is actually is just about the best case on the market when it comes to airflow, and so that makes it a perfect case for using tower-style air coolers, which is what I have here. Now, I'm going to mention a number of things in this review. I'm going to focus on 4 categories. First of all, performance, then features, then ease of use, and then price. And let's start with performance. As I mentioned, this is built on the PM01 chassis, which already had excellent air cooling performance. Not much has changed here. SilverStone did add one feature which ended up not working as well as maybe they would have liked, which was that they added a pass-through for fan leads so that you could mount your fans up here, up top, in the back of this chassis. You can actually fit now 240mm fans. The problem with that is when you put fans right up against a wire mesh, as is in the top of this case, you get a resonance from the air passing through it. And so in the end, although I did test that, I found it didn't pass muster, and I would not recommend you add fans up there. Unfortunately, the pass-through is not large enough for a radiator, because a radiator not only has hoses, but also a cooling block. And SilverStone told me that it would sacrifice too much structural integrity to cut out an opening large enough in that roof panel to pass a huge radiator block through. So you can't put your radiator up there. You can put fans up there, but they sound terrible. It's a miss in terms of performance enhancement, but luckily this case is already excellent for performance. The 3 fans in front, the 140mm fan in the back, and this absolutely unobstructed airflow that you can see from front to back makes this a perfect case in terms of performance and, although you might not expect it, noise. And that is because there's no obstructions for that air to catch on. You don't need to run your fans at high RPMs. And furthermore, these are very high quality fans. SilverStone's fans in the past have not all been top rate, in my opinion. These 140mm fans are excellent. They're very, very quiet. They don't have an extremely high RPM rating, which is good. A lot of case manufacturers put these really high RPM fans in, kind of juice the benchmarks, but they sound terrible when you run them at 100%. These run up to about 1300 RPM or so, and they always sound decent. And right now I have them running at something like 800 RPM. I can barely hear them here. I'm sure you can't hear them on camera. Alright, so that's performance. Pretty much has a lock on performance. There is no better case for air cooling. Features. Already talked about that glass panel that replaced the sliding metal and acrylic panel. I think the future is going to be tempered glass. You know, it's been a couple of years now that case manufacturers are trying to do this. The first wave had some problems with breaking glass in shipment. Not so much once they got in the consumer's hands, but during shipment, impacts could cause that glass to shatter. But manufacturers have figured out how to package these a bit better, and I don't think that's going to be a problem going forward. And the advantage of the tempered glass, in addition to the aesthetic benefit of both a larger viewport as well as a clearer viewport, the optical clarity of this glass is so far beyond any acrylic. There is no comparison. If you want to be able to see the inside of your chassis and you want to see that lighting, you've got it set up there. Glass is the way to do it. But in addition to that, it's scratch resistant. Acrylic is not scratch resistant. I've tested a number of high-end cases, and they've all featured acrylic panels that scratch extremely easily, including the original PM01. This glass can't scratch. You'd have to really try to scratch to get it to be damaged. It will pick up fingerprints, as all glass does, and even though I cleaned this right before this review, it's probably got some fingerprints on it just from picking up the case. Yeah, you're going to have to clean the glass. If you wear glasses like I do, you're used to that. If you have a monitor or TV, you're used to fingerprints getting on there. It's not that big a deal, and the great thing is it won't be damaged. Alright, so the other nice feature here is built-in RGB controls. I have this on a color cycling, but I can also choose to have no color, or you can choose from one of about 7 or 8 colors here. Red is ubiquitous. You probably don't need to buy this to get a red color, because every other case has red. You have blue, which is popular, green to match your NVIDIA graphics card if you have that. A number of other colors. I particularly like this violet. It just kind of looks high-tech, just like this case does. It goes well with this style of case. It looks futuristic. You also have what I think is supposed to be white, but it ends up not actually looking all that white. And that's one of the problems with using an RGB LED. It doesn't have a pure white. It uses all the colors of the spectrum, all the 3 colors I should say, to create that white, and it looks a little off. It always looks a little blue. Yeah, I think this is the white, but you couldn't even tell. It kind of looks like light blue. You can go through either pulsing or a steady state light, on or off, or a rainbow cycle. Now, another great feature of this case that very, very few cases have is a patch through for a motherboard 4-pin RGB header. This is a cutting edge feature only released really in the past 6 months. Unfortunately, the Z270 board I have here from Gigabyte does not have Gigabyte's Fusion controller built in, but I've used other Gigabyte boards with it, and it does work. And furthermore, you can actually add in a number of light strips. I'll show in a moment. The back of the board has back of the case has a RGB controller that has a number of open ports for additional LED-equipped devices like light strips. Other features. This is a great performance feature that SilverStone added, a PWM fan hub. So a lot of cases have fan hubs, but they're not that great because they run your fans at full speed. This one is improved over the original PM01 in that it has a PWM patch through to your motherboard, so you can run all those fans off of one PWM header on your motherboard. Just note that they should probably be matched fans because they're all going to be running at the same PWM level, say 50% or 100%. If you want one to be running full speed and one to be running half speed, you can't do that when you're on a hub. Alright, so I'm going to, before I get to the back of the case, I'm going to just take off this glass panel. It's connected with, attached with 4 thumb screws. I've removed 2 of them already, and I'll remove the other 2 here. Like most glass panels, this comes off the side rather than sliding off from the rear like a standard panel. And that can make it a little inconvenient. First of all, there's 4 thumb screws instead of 2. But second of all, you kind of have to lift it off of its posts here, which I'll attempt to do without looking. Alright, I'm going to get a few fingerprints on that glass. Sorry about that glass. I'm going to put that down. Alright, so now you can get a clearer view, although really it wasn't all that obstructed by the glass, but no longer have that tinted glass in front. You can see right into this case. It really is an excellent case in terms of performance and features, but there are a couple of drawbacks when it comes to the third criteria that I want to rate it on, and that is ease of use. Now, from an aesthetic point of view, this PSU shroud is excellent. I love the addition of these kind of shrouds in modern cases. I think it's the way to go. The only drawback to this is it does make cabling your PSU behind this a lot more difficult. You have to actually attach all your modular cables beforehand, slide your PSU in. That's a little bit messy versus having a big open chamber here, but it looks a lot better in the end. Another ease of use problem is that although SilverStone rates this to be able to fit 240 and 280 millimeter radiator and cooler and fans for a liquid cooler, it actually doesn't work. I did install a 240 millimeter cooler in the previous PM01. It was a very tight fit, and I know with some motherboards it wouldn't fit at all. 280 millimeter coolers is a no-go, and that's despite the fact that if you read SilverStone specs, it sort of suggests you can use a 280 millimeter cooler, but it has a very narrow range for the height, which no cooler actually has. So basically, that's a non-starter. You can't fit a 280 millimeter cooler up top. You can do it in front. There's even a pass-through here, which is kind of neat, for a 360 millimeter cooler if you want to mount a cooler vertically here. But if you're looking to put a big cooler up top, it's not going to work. There's no clearance with the motherboard. This is actually a really tight space for a motherboard, and despite the fact that this case is relatively tall because of its kind of extended roof here and fan scoop, it's actually very short top to bottom when you look at from the PSU shroud to the top of the case here. Not a lot of room there. I have installed just to show that it works, you can install a 140 millimeter fan here. You could actually have two side by side. They'll fit fine. It's that radiator thickness that's going to get you. So the other ease of use problem comes from the back of the case. I'm going to turn this around. I've already removed the panel, and that's a good thing because that panel is really hard to get off because it's really jammed on there with all these cables back here and the narrow width of this case. This is 8.7 inches, which is pretty narrow for a high-end case. You get very little cable management space, and unfortunately it's worse than the PM01 because with the PM01-RGB you have an added controller, your RGB hub up here, and you have a more sophisticated fan hub, which is right over here. There's a lot of wires coming out of these hubs, and this case just wasn't made for that. And I applaud SilverStone for adding features at the request of critics and users, but this case is really bursting at the seams. And I'm hoping that in the future, with the next generation of cases that has the RGB effects and fan hubs, that SilverStone just widen that chassis a little bit. It's just a bit too narrow. So I'm not even going to attempt to put this panel back on. It's a standard sliding metal panel, but you really have to push it on to get it on and push those cables in while you're simultaneously pushing from the back. It's a pain, and if you have to get in and out of your chassis a lot to hook up additional SSDs or fans on these fan hubs or lights, it's not convenient, and that is a blemish on the design of this case. Okay, flipping back to the front, I mentioned that this is a great case for air cooling, and therefore I am showing it off with a high-end Noctua 140mm tower cooler. This is actually an NHD15, which is a dual fan cooler, but I've actually, for aesthetic purposes, removed one of those fans. The front fan is removed so that you can see the Corsair RGB RAM that I put in there. Now keep in mind that that RGB RAM is actually going kind of marching to the beat of its own drummer because it's programmed via Corsair Link, not via the button here that I'm able to modify the colors of the case with. So we're still getting to the point of fully synced RGB lighting. We're not quite there. Gigabyte has actually suggested that its latest motherboards can control that Corsair Vengeance LED RGB RAM. I haven't tested that yet. But I'm adding that RAM into the system so you kind of get that full RGB feel. I actually programmed that RGB RAM to, I guess, go best with this color, so let's put it there. Yeah, so, for an air-cooled system, the front-to-back airflow is perfect. And you also get that exhaust air out the top. I have that fan up here, but even if you don't have a fan up here, you get a lot of airflow out the top that as hot air rises. It's really a perfect system for this kind of setup. I've got a Core i7 7700K, no problem cooling that with this system. And then we have a GTX 1080 Founders Edition video card. Again, this is a really good case for a system, for a high-end video card, because whether it's the Founders Edition with an externally exhausting setup or a custom card that blows its hot air into the case, you get that air out of this case. You get a lot of fresh air in and hot air out. This is perfect for a high-end video card setup. The only blemish in terms of performance is that it's not great for liquid cooling unless you're willing to mount your cooler up in front. Now, so I've covered performance, I've covered features, I've covered ease of use. The last thing that we have to consider is price. And this retails for $160, which is a very good value if you look at the features and the performance. You can't top this in terms of air cooling. You can't really top this in terms of features. I love the built-in fan hub. I love the built-in RGB controller and all of the lighting. This isn't just an RGB controller with some fans. You get the accent colors, you get the LED strip at the bottom, and you can add additional LED strips that will be compatible with the hub. And I should mention that these fans up front are actually using Silverstone's new unique fan grills. So you can actually use any fans you want, although there's nothing wrong with the Silverstone fans here. Silverstone has developed this so that you have the option of changing those fans out if you want to, and you keep your grills in there for your RGB effects. Well, so that all sounds great, $160. There's just one problem. This is clearly a mid-range case built up to high-end specs, okay? And what I mean by that is it's just too cramped for an enthusiast who's spending $160 and wants the freedom to customize their PC to the utmost. Other $160 cases that I've tested have typically, or in that price range at least, have typically just offered a little bit more expandability, a little bit more customization in terms of the parts that you use. This is a mid-sized case with high-end features, which I like a lot, but Silverstone has pushed it to its limit. I think that if you're willing to build a high-end system with a high-end air cooler, and you're willing to deal with kind of fussy side panels, this is a perfect case. For everybody else, it's a little less than perfect, and for that reason I give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I know Silverstone can do better, I know they will do better, and I love this case, but it's not for everyone, and that's why I don't give it a perfect score. Until next time, thanks for watching. If you've liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Talk to you soon.